Welcome into Coach Hayes Huddle. I'm Chris. That's Scott. We're looking at Steve Sarkisian's Texas Longhorns coming into Sanford Stadium, the classic city between the hedges, night game. Has Texas really earned the relevance to be in the talk of being a top 10 team? Appreciate it. Take care.
Georgia Sports Autographs is built by collectors for collectors. They know what fans want because they've been in your shoes, hunting for that perfect piece, the right signature, in the right spot. At every signing, Georgia Sports Autographs make sure it's done right, using the proper ink, following best practices, and paying attention to every detail so you end up with a product you'll be proud to display. They've already worked with many of Georgia's top athletes, and their network gives them access to just about anything you can imagine. If you don't see it listed, don't assume it can't be done. Chances are they can get it for you. Georgia Sports Autograph tests themselves with every event, always improving, always delivering for the ultimate addition to your collection. Trust the team that treats every autograph like its own. Georgia Sports Autographs, where every signature tells a story.
I want to apologize for my audio there. I had a kickback that was talking to me at the same time I was talking, and I don't want you to take care. I want you to get comfortable. I want you to get in here and get excited about what we're going to be seeing this Saturday between the hedges in the classic city of Athens, where Steve Sarkisian is going to make his first visit to Athens between the hedges there, playing the Georgia Bulldogs with his Texas Longhorns coming in. Top 10 matchup. And I know that from the beginning of the year, you look at the preseason and all the hype that Texas was getting, and there was a lot of people on the outside looking in, not just Georgia fans that were feeling that way. A lot of people were feeling this way. You all of a sudden put the SEC logo on the Texas brand and on the Oklahoma brand, and all of a sudden it just changes the demeanor of how they talk. We thought it was obnoxious before. It got to a hyper uber obnoxiousness, and it's still there. I look at relevancy, and I'm trying to figure out where they fit in the grand scheme of things. But somehow the media and the people outside in the college football playoff committee feel like the relevance, believe it or not, Scott, is that they feel like a relevant game for them was coming in with Vanderbilt coming to their place in Austin and playing a key matchup play, a big must win for them to be able to be put back on sort of the stool of, do we belong in the top 10 of football? So, we've got an awesome opportunity to sit here and just break down and talk some X's and O's, hash out some things. But I just want to know how you're doing this evening, Scott. Welcome into the show with me.
I'm doing great, Coach. I really appreciate you having me. And you couldn't said it better myself. Look, media is really, really bad at what I call buffering themselves. So preseason polls, AP polls, everything they got there, they're setting themselves up to have the wrong take, but eventually bring them back right. And so that's what's going on with Texas. Remember, DJ Lagway and Arch Manning were the next coming of the football Jesus. They were supposed to be the top tier quarterback with all the physical talent, the ability to do A through Z at any time, regardless of their lack of experience or previous, injury history. Well, Arch is finally playing at the level or close to the level that they projected against Vanderbilt, and now everything's fixed. Texas is back to that relevant spot. Look, they could come here to Athens for the first time in program history and beat the Bulldogs. So it's a really interesting take. I wish the media would be a little bit more honest with themselves. Obviously, commentators like yourself, proof's kind of in the pudding. You have to be a little more honest with yourself. Otherwise, the commenters let you know. Well, that's kind of the thing with the mass media that they just don't understand is, look, we all have eyeballs. We have enough football knowledge between us to say, hey, look, he's not what was promised. And that's okay. I mean, Arch is playing better. He made some significantly good throws against Vanderbilt. But again, it's always, you got to show me more than 1 week. You got to show me more than 2 weeks. This is a large sample size. And I think it's going to be an exciting matchup, though. Credit to Texas, and they're a good team coming in Athens. So fully agree it's going to be a good game. But I'm kind of like you. It's like I need to see a little bit more than 1 week against Vanderbilt to let me know, hey, look, you're a serious contender.
When I look at it from the quarterback's perspective, as you can see here in the inset, we've got Arch Manning. Obviously, I don't need to give him any introduction. He's got enough pedigree to take care of that himself. He almost oozes quarterback, the perfume of what they do because of the pedigree of his family. But, that's the reason why I think he was set up for failure automatically. I don't think he wanted it. I don't think the justification was there for him, but everybody just force fed it like trying to fit a square peg through a circle hole. And he's had to overcome that through the course of this year, through the growing pains of what it takes to go through an SEC gauntlet as the actual starting quarterback, not the one that comes in and replaces a Quinn Ewers for a few games. If you think about it over time, Texas is having to witness the growing pains of Arch Manning. And I'm going to go ahead and say this. It's unique to me with Texas coming to Sanford Stadium this coming Saturday. I'm very much intrigued with the fact that we have played Texas now, I believe, and we played them 3 times in the last 20 months. Not even 2 years, we've played them 3 times. And I think we've only played Texas A&M 1 time, and they've almost been in there for way over a decade, been probably almost 2 decades. I find that to be very funny.
2018 Sugar Bowl, that was Georgia, Kirby Smart learning that some Georgia players wanted to practice without playing. And that was a big coaching moment for Kirby to turn that over. And we have played them 3 times. It's correct. Georgia's 2-1 in those matchups. And A&M came in a nasty downpour.
Yeah, I remember that.
With
Jimbo Fisher.
That's right. Exactly right. Jimbo Fisher, one of the worst offenses we've had at Georgia. It was Swift, Pickens, and not much else.
Yeah.
So I'm like you. I don't get the spread here. I don't understand why the SEC home office has sat down and say, hey, look, A&M and Georgia have to start playing more often.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just a couple people in the chat. I appreciate y'all being here with me tonight. Hey, Bill, how you doing, man? It's hello from Buckeye Land and go Dogs. Definitely go Dogs. Appreciate you being with us on the show tonight. 225 girl, you've been a regular with us for the last few weeks. We appreciate you being in here. Go Dogs. I think Texas is a good team, but it's something about them that says fraudulent to me. Scott, what you want to tag off of that, piggyback off that right there?
I'm like you, 225. It's not necessarily fraudulent. I'm kind of in the middle. I think they have potential to be a good team, but you got to show me more. That Florida game, unfortunately, I was playing Army that weekend, but as soon as I turned on YouTube TV when they actually had the games, hearing those offensive stats, I thought I was in another world. I thought I had hit my head, fallen down. I said 25 yards of total offense, and this was prior to half, so I don't know how they finished. But when you have those moments and you're supposed to have this this assumption of this is going to be the minimum performance from Texas. Sark has walked in. He's done a fantastic job both personally and coaching to elevate Texas into a legitimately good program. But it's more of this assumed standard that this is going to happen for Texas when we've only really seen a 2-year window of what they're capable of. Well, to me, Georgia fans and Bama fans, the one thing we can share in our modern pedigree here is, look, 2 years is nothing. Win 12 games, 3 out of the next 5 years, 3 out of the next 4. And then, okay, I understand why you're saying, hey, look, Texas can be legitimate here. But that Florida game really opened my eyes. The Mississippi State game, that's the reason I was all worried about it last week is, look, Tennessee and Texas, they walked into old cowbell land and absolutely found themselves in a war and blinked. And before they knew it, they were in overtime. So I wouldn't use fraudulent cut yet because it is a good roster, but there is something there that doesn't just quite smell right. And I hope Georgia's able to, exploit it if they are. And if they're not, I think we'll find out pretty quick on Saturday.
That's well said. They also found out what it was like to go up to Kroger Field and be in like 2 mules fighting over a turnip trying to win a ball game up there. They got the feel of what that's like. But I think they came into a very SEC-friendly schedule. If you look at what it was, I don't really want to call it weak anymore, honestly, because they got the best Vanderbilt teams that's been on charts since probably there's no telling. I can't tell you how long ago they've been relevant. And, they've got a Vanderbilt team that they've struggled against both years that they played them. But, you look at Florida, Mississippi State, Kentucky, those teams that they got were teams that have not necessarily been on the uprise at all, been sort of static over the last few years. And, I look at what they have to play, going forward with Texas A&M, their rival there at the end of the year, big rival at the end of the year. But, you look at all the group of 5 games they played this year. I mean, relevancy, you could say probably their best game that they played this year, offensive output wise, more than likely was against an Oklahoma team that was very benign in that game, with John Mateer not doing a very good job of leading that offense, because their offensive output running the football was terrible. So they really were able to keep them one-dimensional. So you say that their best win on paper right now is an Ohio State, not the best win, but they got a loss to Ohio State at the beginning of the year. And I'm looking down through their schedule right now, and there's not one thing that just sits out and says, you have something that really, stands out to me from your schedule strength. So, that's something that I wonder a lot of times, is that you get the hype of what the brand is, what's on the helmet versus what's being put out on the field. And, I can sit here and talk about the logistics, the statistics all day long, but I watch tape. And my biggest setback from this is Sark is always going to try to put the ball from his quarterback hands out of his hands as quick as he can. And as an offensive coordinator, I want to be able to, give my quarterback high efficient throws, high percentage throws, things that are going to get him in a comfort, into a rhythm where he gets to stay on his spot without having to worry about those 3 and 4 second windows to process plays. And what I've noticed with that is Arch is not actually going out there and executing the way they want him to. His accuracy is down. When he gets moved from his spot, his accuracy goes down. His accuracy goes down even more. And, even against Vanderbilt, as well as I've even got some clips here against Vanderbilt, because I was looking at that game in Florida as much. I just don't see that offensive efficiency that they want to see from a Texas Longhorn football team. And it all comes down to what Steve Sarkisian is doing and how he's getting it to his quarterback, and how his quarterback goes out there and executes his offense. And it comes down to it. They've got to find some type of formula, because I know at the University of Georgia right now, if there's one that's trending upward, is obviously Gunnar Stockton. And I believe that because of that, it's Mike Bobo figuring out, hey, what's your strengths? What are your strengths in game? What do you do well from the right hash, left hash, middle of the field? What makes you feel comfortable when you're out there in these certain formations or these certain tendencies that the defense is giving you? That's how a good team becomes great. And I'm beginning to see that with Georgia's offense, and that's something that's nice to see. Unfortunately, Texas's offense after week 9 still, to me, is just it seems very chaotic. It's very sporadic. And that's something to me that just doesn't spell well when you come into a top SEC clash on a Saturday night against a formidable foe that seems to be getting better and more consistent every week.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
go ahead.
I think, like you said, they're sporadic. A lot of plays they had against Vanderbilt were, screens. There were a couple good throw smarts. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but you saw how Vanderbilt can get vulnerable in open field defensively. Auburn kind of show you how you can attack them, a team that was offensively way in the lows, that found a way to make that a high-scoring game. Vanderbilt's really, really good on offense. So, again, I want to give them kudos where they deserve it. But I'm like you with Texas. There's something about the assumed pedigree because there's a Longhorn on their helmet. And I will say this to pump Georgia fans up. Understand, Georgia's now in that realm historically with Texas. They both have 900 wins to themselves. They have 4 claimed and recognized national titles. The NCAA is kind of wary on a 1942 one, but Georgia could claim 2 or 3 more. I'm sure Texas. But Texas has had that routine success before. And so I think what the media is trying to do is they want the big brands to remain big brands. So when they come out, they want this narrative to be sold, and they'll use any bit of evidence that they can find, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, to support that. And so I'm like you with Sark. I think there's something there that he's got to get a lot more consistent with. And look, I think Mike Bobo deserves a lot more credit than people are giving him. Look at the film on Gunnar Stockton over just the last 4 weeks. Look how much better he's gotten at staying in the pocket, the trust he's had for the offensive line, how the offensive line's gelling together, and that opens up a brand new world. And guys, look, Colby Young was the best X we had. Really, really physical, bullied people. He reminded me kind of Marcus Jack Saint in that regard, but he was a little bit more physical out of the screen game. And now you change again, and you rely on a really, really good run game that Georgia has. And it just opens up the entire playbook. We can now execute at a high level, and now we can call high-level plays and concepts, knowing Gunnar can do it. I'm not sure Texas is there, though. And that's where you're going to need to beat a Georgia. Look, Bama's offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, I can't stand losing to Bama, but I have to give him all the credit in the world. He openly admitted, for us to beat Georgia, I knew I had to go back all the way to 2022 against Ohio State and watch every single game to understand how we're going to execute at an elite level, especially night in Athens. That's one thing that I think a lot of people are kind of hand waving away. if they think Texas is going to come away with this, is look, one, Texas is traveling. Sometimes they do better traveling. I know Texas fans like that narrative, but you're coming in night. Yeah, you've had the bye week, which can help you and can hurt you. Into really what's been a meat grinder for every team not named Alabama.
Yeah. It's a hostile environment. It's something they're not going to be expecting when they get to Sanford Stadium on Saturday, nor the fans either, as they come down Lumpkin Street or whatever street they're coming down to get to the stadium. I wanted to put this comment out there. Scott Green, we got another Scott Green here. Go Dogs, comes down to the O-line and run game for Dogs and applying pressure to the quarterback. What do y'all think? I'll say just 100% amen. If there's anything that you can say, it's not even a coach speak concept. When you have the ability to do something like that, it's like me saying Oklahoma needs to have a proven run game against Alabama on Saturday, when we know that's probably not going to happen because they haven't proven it yet, honestly, in any SEC game that they've played. I know that because I've been breaking film down for them from my buddy that does the Oklahoma podcast out in the Midwest, and I had a chance to talk to him about it and thought that was a weak link for them. I think that would really help John Mateer out if he had a decent running back and they could establish a running game. They're inconsistent with that. But Georgia doesn't have that problem. We have a three-headed monster of Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, and Gunnar Stockton with plus 1,300 yards, north of 1,300 yards rushing between the three of them. We're averaging way over 150 yards per game, and I think that's something that's definitely got to be established because, to me, that sets the precedence for everything else that you want to see successful in a football game. How about you, Scott? What you think?
Absolutely. I think the new clock rules have made being efficient the king of everything, both defensively and offensively. You're going to have less plays, less possessions, so you got to do more with each one. I think that's my concern if I were a Texas fan is, look, Georgia's defense is not the Georgia defense of the past. They are getting better in certain areas. The linebacker plays really stepped up. It seems like a lot of the young guys are better than those that we've had before, but that's kind of part and parcel of having more raw talent, but now getting the experience to actually execute and showcase that.
Yes.
If I were Texas, I definitely would be concerned about, look, if Georgia's able to draw up some simulated looks and some odd fronts we haven't seen with the speed they have and move Arch off the spot, how does he react? Because what Arch is going to have to do that seldom happens against Georgia, even against their bad defenses. Look, guys, Georgia only loses to elite quarterback performances or elite quarterbacks. It does not happen often, and that's what you have to do. And, Texas's run game is going to have to show up because if they have to low gear it and they have to match Georgia's marches down the field to say, okay, look, we got to get our defense off the field and hold them off the field. Offensively, you're going to be able to measure that out, especially with how you said everything's kind of been either all good or all bad, explosive or nothing for Texas. And look, Georgia's offensive line is going to have a really good day. There's a lot of positives there. I think Georgia fans and the team have a lot of reason to be confident with the combination they have because now you're 6 deep. You know this coach. You definitely know your business about the offensive line. Look, man, if I'm 6 deep and I can rotate at any point in the game and have that fresh body and know, look, I have a fresh set of legs too. Run 12 personnel, cracking down. You can absolutely run a lot of gap against these guys and really test them. I know Ant Hill's a good linebacker too. But I'm telling you, that's the thing that can get really frustrating is those climb blocks. If you're having to hit a man that's 300 pounds and a lot bigger than you over and over and over, that's where I think Georgia can test a lot of teams. I think Texas falls into that. If, look, not only are we going to drag you into deep waters, we're going to test you every single play because, like you said, Gunner's been executing at a much higher level, and now it's less of run to only use Gunner for so much. Gunner is now an absolute asset in a very positive way, both running and throwing the ball. And getting Zachariah Branch involved in the downfield, that's another thing you got to really be worried about if you're Texas. I mean, that Florida game showcased, look, we can be thrown on by a team that has no business throwing. And this is the best run game in the SEC. Make no bones about it.
And, when I look at it too, I was going to go with this comment here. Bill had a good comment that I like to see. Is it me or does it seem once they started throwing to the tight ends again that the offense has really come along? They have blocked their asses off and glad to see them get some touchdowns. There's no doubt when you add the 12 personnel concept, that's the reason why we don't go away from the tight end game, where you don't see a lot of 10 personnel in our groupings, where you have 4 wide receivers, 1 running back. We're going to play 11 and 12 personnel for the majority of the time because typically the H that plays the second tight end is a very athletic athletic age, and we've been very fortunate to have very athletic Ys as well, from the Darnell Washington times, as well as what we have now in Delp and Lucky, and obviously what we're beginning to see from Elias Williams, and God forbid when Ethan Barber gets back as well. I don't know if it's Barber or Barbour. I think it's Barbour.
I think it's Barber.
Yeah, I've always tried to figure out a way to make sure I pronounce them correctly. But my thing is just trying to get them to understand that if you're in that personnel, you still can throw 3-man, 4-man, 5-man game, and you can still run the football effectively and not have to just run your inside zone game, which is something I think is also a lot of people are not seeing. Duo is probably the number one running scheme in the NFL, and I see it beginning to slowly trickle down into the college level. And now we're adding even some other things in there I see from like what the Los Angeles Rams are doing, even where we're adding an ISO concept with our Z coming down into the formation and actually leading up in there to block ISO with the duo scheme. And I know they're going to have some kind of play action off that eventually. I saw both Dylan Bell and London Humphreys come down in motion and run that, and we were successful in the run game with that. And I know there's going to eventually be a play action that comes off of that as well. But I'm going to go back to what you said about Anthony Hill Jr., because something that, with those two, Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill, those are the two monikers you hear every time you think about a Texas front. There's no doubt that those two kids are gifted athletically with high twitch, move very well laterally, and they're just good, solid, cerebral athletes. Texas would hang their hat on them any day of the week and twice on Sunday. But what I have to go back to is I think about when Jarvis Jones was really good for us back in I guess it would be around the 2010, 2011 era. I was trying to think of what year it was in, but Jarvis was great at rushing the edge. He had a great presence to get to the quarterback, had great bend, very athletic. But you know what? All of a sudden, what Alabama decided to do that year in the SEC championship was we're going to run right at him, and we're going to wear his ass down. And it showed, because Jarvis couldn't take. He was getting double teamed. He was getting kicked out. He was being plowed, it seemed like, every game. And they basically neutralized his play by running right at him. I think we can do the same thing against Texas, because we have the established pedigree of a good running program. We've established that, something that Coach Smart has talked about since the beginning of the year. And I say we run right at Colin Simmons. And you're right. When you got guards and tackles that are climbing up to a Anthony Hill Jr. and continually just pressing on him, and as Coach Smart and anybody who's ever listened to any one of his speeches, you keep chopping at that eventually is going to make that tree fall. And that makes a linebacker who is very, for the most part, not necessarily heavy in the ass, if you know what I'm talking about, but very, he's light and can move, but he's getting leaned on a lot, if you know what I mean. All of a sudden, that starts getting very frustrating from a kid like that standpoint. So that's the reason why I think we're seeing the success from the tight end game, is because everything else is molding around it. We're having successful ability to run the football out of all the different 11 and 12 personnel schemes. And then that opens up your RPO game. That opens up your play action. And that's why we're seeing our tight ends get open a little bit more. And as much for what Gunner has done throwing the ball over Delp's head and under his feet, he made up for it with a one throw against Mississippi State, because that was a one-on-one throw in a mailbox to him on the Y delay, where he ran out on the stretch down the seam and caught the football. Got a lot of comments here. I wanted to get to that analytics that I just had. I wanted to make sure we appreciate y'all being in here with us, guys, and talking shop with us. Dr. Morpheus, greetings from Dog in Baton Rouge. Hello, man, down in LSU. How do you think we can pressure Arch? How are our young DBs coming along? I'll tell you this. I'll let Scott. Okay, he's that way. I'll let Scott tell you about the DBs. What I'm going to tell you about is from the pass rush. From my perspective, I don't think we're ever going to see just this tremendous output all of a sudden where our front four is getting to the quarterback. We are a scheme built around gap integrity. We're going to put pressure as long as we can and be gap fundamentally sound, and we're going to end up getting pressure from someone at the linebacker level. Would I love to see an Elijah Griffin get off a one-on-one and make a tackle? Hell yeah. Would I love to see Gabe Harris do the same thing? Sure. Would I love to see Kristen Miller? Sure. Those things are going to happen eventually, and it's exciting, but that's like when something like that happens, it's a one-on-one situation, and it also comes back to the play of the linebackers. You can run simulated pressure where you pull out Quinn or you pull out Gabe, or you have something where you bring four anyway. You still bring a linebacker, but there's a lot of different things that we're beginning to see, and that's the beauty, because when the coaching staff has trust with their program, you're going to start seeing these little tweaks that start happening, aka Aiden Walker getting on the field against Mississippi State and being able to put in pressure packages, coincidentally similar to what they did with Chris Cole last year. So you're going to start seeing those kinds of things. But when you really start cooking and you can open up your playbook defensively is when you can get home with simulated pressure or 5-man pressure, bringing maybe one more backer, because then still behind that you can still play cover 2, cover 1. That means you got guys locked up on hips and you still got 1 or 2 guys in zone over the top of that. So I think that's something that's definitely coming along with that, but I'm going to let Scott talk to you more about from the defensive back perspective.
So I think the defensive backs are slowly but surely getting better. I think Dalen Everett obviously anchors that position group down. There's little things they can do, kind of just football savvy wise, of learning to protect the sticks a little bit better. I believe it was a 3rd and 3. Anthony Evans, really athletic receiver, just finds a way to get them that set of first downs. I believe they converted 4 in the first series with the opening script that Levy drew up for them. And it's just little things like that they have to get better with. I think KJ Bolden has been really good, but the issue is he's not really supported on the other side. And I hate to keep picking on Ja'Cory Thomas. There's a lot of plays where I'm seeing it. I'm like, man, you are absolutely beat here. There's nothing you can do. You can't recover. You made a huge error. You either jumped on the route at the break and guessed, or you were faked out by keeping your eyes in the backfield way too long, as we've seen time and time again. So I still think there's some personnel change that needs to be made at that second safety spot. With Jones, Jones is healthy on the injury report. Correct me if I'm wrong, Coach. I thought he was back in it. So him rotating with Ellis is a good sign. Ellis still has things he's got to work on in phase. Again, turning that head. But look, man, the physicality is going to matter here. I think that's the thing that I haven't seen Texas really play is a physical group of DBs. I think Zion Branch adds to that level of physicality in the run fit. Elias Robinson's got to get a little bit better getting handsy. Jones, number 15, I just like him a lot. I think he really is the answer at corner 2. Everett we know is. But as a group, they're going to have to step up a little bit better and just be smart football players. You already have the athleticism. Perfect example of, to me, what was either an error by call or, Everett making a mistake. This guy's really experienced. It was 2nd and 10 against Ole Miss right out of the half. Look, you're giving that receiver time to put you in an open field one-on-one position where if you're locked in man, that safety cannot help you immediately. He's got to break his eyes off his man and come help you. And that's 10 yards on a 53-yard and some change field. That's going to be a difficult play to make. So they got to be really, really smart. I think they are getting better. With Arch, I think he's going to make a few throws where you're just like, darn, we should have been here and that. But I know Aguirre's going to be solid. I know Everett's going to be solid, corner 2. Again, just growing. The only spot that truly, truly concerns me is number 20 at that other safety position and how they attack it. Because one thing Sark is good at, identifying the bye, because they're coming off a bye week, is isolating your weaknesses. But the thing is, I think we have an answer in that in another personnel. Like, look, if you're already getting beat in that area, what's the worst thing that can happen with a guy who's better at run fit?
Yep. I agree with you. Very well said. And, funny enough, I find that Georgia always tends to be the redheaded stepchild of the SEC because how many teams get an open bye week prior to playing us, it seems like. But honestly, I really like the fact that we're in a groove right now. It's the same groove that I really felt like even after the Ole Miss game, as well as Gunnar Stockton played. Everybody wants to raise that level of hype. I'm one of those that stays even keel with that because I wanted to see what he would do against Florida. When you look at what you've had matchup-wise against those guys, Auburn and Florida, who had an equilateral defensive side of the football, we saw the struggles that could come from that, and we saw that we didn't have as explosive of our offensive side of the ball play that we did against, say, an Ole Miss or even what we did against Tennessee, as well as what we did against Mississippi State. But what I am beginning to see is every little check mark that I've had a box for Gunnar Stockton as the years progress continues to get checked off. Staying in the pocket longer, pocket presence being a little bit better, pre-snap recognition so much better, having an understanding of what's strong with him because of how he uses his leg and uses that to his advantage on play action and RPO game. His ability to keep his eyes downfield when he is flushed from the pocket. Just his cerebral conscious about the play itself as it's being developed, where he can go through progressions now and he's beginning to make those layered throws across the middle. Not a ton of them, but he is now beginning to make those and showing better accuracy with those guys. He has got the highest efficient rate of any SEC quarterback and is in the top 3 in the nation in quarterback efficiency. His QBR rate is off the chart, and offensively, it's scary what Georgia is doing right now offensively. I have left this up here on the screen for a while, but I got Georgia Burr 11. Do you think Ellis could play safety? Real quickly, I had for a longest time, because I've not been the biggest Ja'Cory Thomas fan, and nothing against him. It's watching film that's made me feel this way, not just because I want to down a kid. I've watched his reps, him and Kyron Jones both. I had at one point in time before we started seeing Zion Branch get some reps, I was actually thinking about putting Janelle Aguero. I would love to see Janelle Aguero at the strong safety position and let DeMelo Jones play the star, because he's physical. He's that hybrid player that can play a linebacker type like Tyke Smith used to do, but also be on the hip because he's played a ton of corner and man. He understands that role. And then you still keep Dalen Everett and Ellis Robinson on the field. But with Zion Branch emergence, I think you're going to continue to see Janelle at the nickel, just because he's got more reps there. He's repped it there a lot more, and they're going to continue to try to work DeMelo Jones in and let him be just a ball player when he's on the field. So, guys, I do appreciate all the comments in here. We were going to move on real quick. I wanted to talk about the stats right here, and this is something from Dawgs Stats that I got. I'm good friends with Josh. Really, I just dig that guy. He does a great job. But if you go up and you look at the average points per game at 29.6, that's almost a 10-point differential from Georgia's average points per game. And if you look at them against the Power Four, it's even 5 points lower than that. So if you look, there's a lot of red down there in their schedule from the time that they played Ohio State and the loss against Florida. But even with the, look at the struggles against Kentucky and Mississippi State. And even if you look at what they did against Vanderbilt later in the game, those reds show up as well. They're not producing the way they should be, and it is definitely showing. And it's something that I feel like as we move forward this week and get into the game on Saturday, honestly, that offensive production and that defensive production, I hope from a team that's really beginning to be on the climb, continues to leave them in a lot of red columns with that. So I wanted to just give you a real quick inset to Kirby Smart. This is what Kirby Smart had to say about Arch Manning this past week during his normal presser.
Yeah, he's playing with more confidence. I think number one, he's getting better protection. He's seeing things well. He's making good decisions. He's getting the ball out of his hand quickly. He's maturing. He's had an opportunity to play and grow, and you don't really get that until you get out there and play. He played a good bit last year, but the kind of games he's had to play in this year, just a different stature in terms of the SEC gauntlet. And just, you watch game by game. I watched yesterday each game throughout the year and watched him just grow and play better. He's extending plays. He's doing really well with scrambles, keeps his eyes downfield. He doesn't look at the rush. He's made some really impressive wow throws.
Yeah, he did make a couple of wow throws, and I'm actually going to show you in some clips here in just a second. But a lot of buzz. I know he's going to give you a lot of coach speak about Arch Manning, but I do agree with what he's saying, because theoretically, even though it's not a huge incline from each game, he has shown a small progression as he's moved forward. And I'm sure if you're looking at his SEC play in general, what Coach Smart is saying is true, but he's not going to go out on the limb. He was a highly recruited kid for the University of Georgia as well. Coach Smart is very close with the Manning family. I mean, this kid carries so much baggage with him due to the fact of who his family is. And uniquely enough, he ends up going to Texas, and now he's having to deal with those growing pains as your starting quarterback with really no time to really build that experience that he would like to build. So he's having to basically grow up in front of the Texas fan base, and that hasn't bode well this year. Billy Napier being fired from Florida, I wanted to talk about this because everybody wants to hit on it. I want to talk to you about it from a coach's perspective. But, Billy Napier was cited this week up at Georgia's practice. Previously the head coach of the University of Florida, and was let go by them, by their stakeholders this past month. And I just wanted to get your feedback from that, Scott. Is Billy Napier up in Athens town talking to Coach Smart and staff, and just up there chewing the fat, I guess, right?
Yeah. So think about it multiple ways. Kirby Smart's one of the best competitors in the nation. That's what makes him arguably, not really, but factually, the best coach in college football that's currently coaching. Billy Napier did some really good things with not such a good offensive situation at Florida against Texas. I mean, if you look at how they eliminated a lot of what Texas wanted to do, attacked them in certain ways that they really couldn't defend, especially when you get the average of what that offense is, and then you see what they did against Texas. That's the way I judge games. So if you're a B+ student, you take a test and you get an A+, that's a great performance. You're better than your average. So Billy Napier coming up to Athens is interesting in a lot of good ways. Think of it this way, guys. Too often we take what a coach did as a head coach and we copy that over to what they do as a coordinator, or more specifically here, a position coach. guys, Billy Napier knows what it's like to look at receivers and handpick them, and he does have a lot of good connections because, one, from everyone I've heard of, the little bit of rumor mill is that he is a good guy. He's just not a very good head coach, especially for what the SEC is and especially what Florida expects. Not giving Billy any excuses here, but the last 2 seasons in terms of the teams they played has been absolutely unreal. That's not an excuse for him. It's just, look, just like Will Muschamp caught a lot of flack, what he did as a head coach, and then he goes back to being a DC and everyone's eyes are open again. It's like they realize, oh, wow, he's really, really good at this. That's what Billy is with the receivers and some of the offensive identity that he can find in personnel. I never want to call him plays for us or anything like that. But look, guys, give the guy credit where he was good at. There's a reason he was hired initially at Florida, and there's a reason that he had such a high, projection from all the media personnel out there because what he did at the G5 level. So I think it's a really good thing. I think it shows that Kirby is trying to get every single advantage he can. I'm sure Billy's telling him A to Z, hey, look, this is how we attack. This is who we attacked. Obviously, film shows you that. But when you get inside the head of the head coach, former head coach, that was able to identify those things, it gives you even more. It opens kind of the book to the entire chapter versus just looking at one page at a time. So I like it. I think it's good. I think it shows a good sign of things. And I wouldn't be shaking my head or really worried about it because, look, guys, we know Billy Napier's not going to touch anything that Kirby doesn't want him to. And at this point, just advice phase, which you really want to see.
I want to sit here and say this. Billy Napier, son of Bill Napier, who I coached against growing up, basically, as I started my coaching career, Bill was a very vested head coach at Murray County, same county where the McConkeys are from. Billy's a Northwest Georgia boy who had a dad as a head coach. Kirby, obviously a Southwest Georgia boy from Bainbridge, whose dad was a head coach. He mentioned that in his presser. Guys, there's a fraternity that is built, no different than what he did when he brought Muschamp back after what happened with him at South Carolina. When you have a fraternity of guys and, with his success and, when you look at Kirby's success and along with knowing when he worked with him at Alabama, because I got a chance to sit in an actual meeting room with Billy Napier when he was working with the wide receivers at the University of Alabama when Lane Kiffin was there as offensive coordinator. Guys, I sat there and watched him go through some wide receiver stuff that was just unbelievable. I mean, the stuff that he was talking about, the concepts, the ideology of what you do after the ball is snapped, much less not the pre-snap recognition. You can tell he's highly cerebral. And Scott, you said it best. I've seen it too as well in the coaching realms. You have a lot of good OCs. You have a lot of good DCs. You have a lot of good assistant coaches who aspire to be coordinators that unfortunately when they get that head coaching job just can't fit the bill. It's just not in their DNA. And I think Billy was just in that situation. I just think he did not fit the culture of what Florida was wanting. It started to begin to, disintegrate as time went on. I really wish I knew more of the ins and outs of that situation, but there's no reason why, Florida is going to hate no matter what. But I understand where the roots of this is at and why we see a Billy Napier possibly taking maybe even an analyst role before we know it down the road as being a part of staff, because I know Billy and Billy's family very well. I think that they would be, he's a very humble guy and he's someone who's very, like I said, very smart and understands the game, and he would be a welcome asset, I know, to Kirby's staff. And it was one of those things where you like that key and lock mentality with him. So, with Billy being there, I think it's really like the church ladies talking on the pews on Sunday morning with the morning gossip, is that I think it's a great fit, honestly, if Billy does decide to come back to University of Georgia and help in some capacity. So, kudos to him, and, kudos to Coach Smart. And who knows, he may have just come back up there just to see how his bro's doing, because they are good friends. They know each other very well. But I wouldn't doubt if we're probably seeing something down the road with those two being in the same office together. I've got some breakdowns here, Scott. I was going to show just a couple of things. A lot of Texas fans right now are feeling great about Arch's, growth of what he's doing, what we're seeing. This is a kid, if I look at his, he's got over 2,000 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. QBR is really low. But what you'll probably see more than anything is just his average per completion being a little bit on the lesser side, and it's because of reasons like this. I'm going to show you the first clip here. But, obviously this was very important to them because y'all know what happened again. The wide receiver did basically all the work there. We're going to show another screen here. We're going to go screen left with a fast his quarterback. He wants to be able to give your quarterback quick throws that are efficient, that are going to put the ball out of his hands in less than 2 seconds and let receivers do good things for you. Because when you get a quarterback in a rhythm, and those are the kind of throws, when we have those people who are the screen haters, this is going to set up for a Fox play. And eventually they do actually run the Fox play just like we did to London Humphreys against Mississippi State, and they actually have a completion against it as well because they're flying up to it. Here's another screen out here on the right-hand side as well. Guys, believe it or not, I really think Parker Livingston and Emmett Moseley are two of their better receivers. Ryan Wingo seems to have sort of the name balance there of what everybody talks about, but those two kids, 13 and 3, play very well from him. I'm going to play this one again real quick. Again, this is the Livingston kid out there, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Is that 13 or 3?
3 was at receiver 1 to the field side, coach. So I believe you're right. I think that's
Yeah.
it.
So 3's to the field right here. So that's Parker Livingston. But as much as everybody wants to get excited about Arch, I went ahead and pulled out a couple of plays because this is the Arch Manning that Texas fans want to see in these next couple of slides here. This is a great route. You got the ball in a mailbox. I'm going to show it to you one more time. I mean, this is a one-of-one throw, guys. This is to the wide side of the field. This is a left hash to right field out route right there, and he throws it on a dime, throws it on the money. That's something that they want to see out of him. And then this right here, I call this Seattle. This is out of trips left, the safety. So, that's something I see that Texas could exploit, watched on film, and feel very confident with. But again, you got to have an Arch Manning that makes this throw. He's not under pressure. He's in his spot. He's able to have time to throw the football, and we can't give him that amount of comfort to throw it. So that's something I think is very important to understand if we are to contain Arch Manning, no doubt. Scott, you've been with me here for a while, and the one thing that I wanted to get from your insight that I really find you have a keen insight on is you just have the natural ability to kind of get a feel of what's going to be the success factor that Georgia needs to have in order to win this ball game on Saturday. I think obviously you can't go without saying it's a must win. We need to win the football game to continue our aspirations of making the college football playoffs and obviously making ourselves with a national championship run. But it's how we win the game is more important to me than just winning the game. There's got to be some things in there that really set us apart to let them know that Texas shouldn't have been in this even talking process to begin with, and Georgia should have been there. So I'm very interested to hear your feedback here on what you think. What is going to be the key, couple of factors that you feel like Georgia has to do to make sure that we clear all the naysayers, we shut everybody up, and everybody realizes that Georgia Bulldogs are for real?
As a whole team, it'd be keep the momentum that you've gained. Don't let it slip. Start fast, at least for the first couple series. Understand you got to win the middle 8, like Coach Kirby says. But I would say start fast, kind of smack them in the mouth, be physical. But if I'm going to go personnel, I think interior linebacker for Georgia's got to continue to execute at an elite level. Like you said, the simulated pressures, we're not winning tons of one-on-ones. We're keeping, our rush lane discipline. We're being gap sound and have we do everything. We want to get Arch off his spot for sure. Well, we want him to know that there's people there. If you look at what happened to Blake early at Mississippi State, guys, look, Jeff Lebby's a really good offensive coach. That first offensive series was scripted to perfection. Convert 4 third downs, but Blake knew there was a white jersey waiting for him somewhere. We got to him multiple times. There's one where he just made an excellent play. I believe 2 defenders ran into each other. I think it was Wilson won the is the 4-eye, 3-eye tech that just somehow broke loose. I think that's where Georgia's going to have to win a lot of its battles, because if you do that, you already know you're a really good run defense. You know that you're going to force them to eat a lot of shoulder pad to get any sort of yards on the ground. So if you're going to do this, it's got to be through that simulated looks, and CJ and Wilson have to continue playing. And then obviously you got to have Justin continue to step up. Now, again, we pointed to DBs, but help them out. So the front 4 and the 2 interior linebackers, I think, have to have an A+ game in terms of being really exotic and really, really sound in how they come after Arch, because we need to test them. That's the one thing Georgia defenses are so notorious for, is not only do we dictate terms, but you're going to be tested. If you look at the teams that successfully beat Georgia, and it wasn't based on a tip ball, the Prayer and Jordan Hare kind of moments, or it wasn't just a head scratcher bust, it really was elite quarterback play for a full 60 minutes, period. And force Texas to march it. If they're going to go down the field on you, force them to do what Ole Miss did. That's why I was so impressed with Trinidad and Ole Miss is, look, guys, they have to execute 15 plays and be in the positive for all but, 3 of
And
them.
people don't realize how hard that is to do.
They have no clue. And that's okay. Look, again, I get it as a fan. I'm saying the craziest stuff you could believe, and I'm not paying attention to it. When I go back, take the emotional hat off, I'm sitting there thinking, man, that's just impressive. And a lot of that has to do with deficiencies in terms of, rush lane being sound. Now, Arch is athletic enough to punish you there, but honestly, I'm okay eating some of those plays because Arch thinks, oh man, did he just get a free release? Did I not recognize that? How did he come? Where did he come from? And if you continue to do that, you accelerate his internal clock. And to be, like you said, quarterback progresses just like a stair step. You don't jump from the first step to all the way to the second floor. Arch is getting better in certain aspects of his game. But look, man, this isn't a I've arrived moment on one game. That's just unfair to Arch. We can't continue to be unfair to these really talented but not yet proven players. It's the same thing with Gunner. They did the thing in Ole Miss. Oh, man, he's there. But there was a light switch. You could tell he started getting more confident. And then when he continued to show us, man, look, this guy's got a lot of the tools in his tool bag, and they're only getting better. But to switch other sides to the other side of the ball, I think, one, Gunner's mentality is, I'm telling you guys, we can metric this all day. We could look at efficiency, but there's just something integral to the kid. He's a true blue Georgia football player. He would chop his arm off if you told him to. And if I said, look, you're going to win a game by chopping your pinky off, I guarantee you, Gunner would turn around and say, all right, coach, which one? So continue to implement that in the game mentally. But in terms of just scheme, it seems so, white bread here to say this, but Georgia needs to smash them in the face early and make it where they have to pick their poison. And I think you said it really, really succinctly. Attack their best players and make them be the best players. Drag them into deep waters and truly see who wants it more. Yep. Because I think that's what you do against really athletic players like that is you take away their legs. We're in the fourth quarter. Hey, you're a little bit half step slow. And I'm going to keep executing at this high level. Layering the football, I think, is going to be really important. But phasing in the tight ends has shown you how this offense has evolved because Gunner's actually seeing it by not over-processing it. Yep. So Gunner would go through his reads and progressions. But by the time the actual route was in the portion of the progression where it's like, all right, now you got to hit that window, he's slower, he's more confident, he's more efficient in how he's doing that. So you need to continue to see that. And to me, that's just more of take the momentum you gained at Mississippi State and continue it on. And really, again, lines of scrimmage win everything. Here, I feel very confident in this offensive line, but I want them to take that next full step forward in terms of just raw physicality. I want that line of scrimmage reset every single snap. And I don't know if Texas has played a team that's capable of doing that outside of Ohio State. Obviously, Ohio State's a younger team, turned a lot of people over, so you kind of it's hard to judge week ones like that. But that was my biggest takeaway from Mississippi State and why I want to keep that momentum. Georgia reset the line of scrimmage every single play. And remember, guys, common opponents are important here. Mississippi State absolutely has taken better teams, better rosters into deep waters and had them in a position where they could lose or win the game by a small margin. And so if Georgia's going to separate itself some of the statistics, some of the film are saying they do, I think it starts by remaining who you are, but taking what you've been really good at and keeping it going. Because the interior linebacker play has been excellent. I think the offense obviously has been excellent. I mean, they're second in the nation in what the NFL uses as efficiency stat. So those are the two things I'd take away, Coach.
And I love what you say there because this comment goes right with what you're saying too. It says, I'm not worried about our offense. Having 71 at right tackle and sliding Gaston down to right guard has kicked us into a higher gear. Our tight ends are blocking their butts off. First off, that is the fluidity that you want to see from your offensive line because what we saw in the first 4 weeks, I was really beginning to question if we were ever going to have an offensive line that was going to look similar to anything that we had seen in the past. And bringing Ernest Green, because I'm going to tell you, and Scott knows this as well, I really thought Ernest Green might not get a spot back as well as Dontrell Glover and Juan Gaston were doing with having Monroe Freeling oppo to him. But it just goes to show bringing a tenured veteran who's playing at his best level right now. He's healthy. He's played the last 2 games scot-free. He seems to be doing well. I'm not calling him out when I'm watching film on him either. When I see film with him, I'm going, wow. I watched him and Gaston pull on a gap scheme, and they bully balled a guy, knocked his helmet off, made him hurt, told his mama, you need to come get him. He's, whatever it may be. I can't say some of the things I normally say because I'd be cussing too much, but they definitely made him not like life at that point in time. But just watching it, because I was watching it from the tight copy, seeing Juan Gaston and Ernest Green pulling on gap scheme was epic. I mean, just to watch those 2 big bodies stand up and pull flat across the line of scrimmage was unbelievable. And I agree with you on that. I think that was Dr. Morpheus. Mm-hmm. When you look at him coming back, he has somehow solidified the ability for our offensive line, along with that 12 personnel deal where Elias Williams getting some playing time with Lawson Lucky being out. We saw all the different variations of things they can do. Guys, I watched Delp take another guy to the bus on a blocking scheme out wide on a fast screen. He seems to have one of those. It's like he's figured it out. It's like, man, I am putting game tape on every week by doing something like this. And when the NFL scouts see that a kid that does that, when he's blocking on gap scheme, or if he's just blocking on duo, or he's out wide blocking on fast screens, and then he runs down the middle of the field on a vert and catches a ball on the 9 route. I mean, that is what kind of tape people want to see from the NFL standpoint, those NFL scouts want to see. And it continues just to be something that has evolved, as Bill said a while ago, bringing the tight ends back into the offensive schematic of things and getting them involved. And like you said, Scott, we're now Gunnar Stockton is beginning to see it from a standpoint where instinctively it's just happening instead of him having to process that every time, is beginning to make things look really well for this offense to be clicking at a great time, because I would definitely want to see that growth beginning to happen at this point in juncture of the season than for us to peak after week 4 or 5 and then see a decline. Texas has really got a lot to prove. And I think you say, well, we've got a lot to prove, but there's a lot of different things that go on with that. We know what we're capable of doing. Texas still is in that sort of mindset. You know what we felt like after week 4 and 5 when we'd played Tennessee and we'd played Auburn, and we're still sitting there going, what are we as an identity? What are we doing? I think that has begun to finally gel, and it comes from the offensive line. It's come from our running game. It's come from getting the tight ends involved, and it's come from that chemistry that I think Coach Bobo is really doing with Gunnar Stockton now. And you've got Gunnar Stockton feeling very comfortable under center in this system right now. And unfortunately, Texas, I don't feel like has that same. They don't have the cogs in their mechanism right now, or they're grinding. Those gears are grinding. There's smoke coming out of the ears, and they're still trying to find some type of identity. And I think that's the reason why we see Georgia take care of business on Saturday. Guys, we've got a ton of people in the comments tonight. I can't thank y'all enough for staying in. We're in here with us and hanging out with us tonight. Daniel, see you in here. Good evening, gentlemen. Excited to see Georgia put it on short horns. Go Dogs. Dr. Morpheus, again, appreciate that comment. Scary. I agree with you. Now you've got Dontrell Glover, who to me, Dontrell and Juan Gaston should have all SEC honors as true freshmen this year. Now you get the opportunity to rotate Dontrell out. He can go over to Micah Morris's side. He can stay with Juan Gaston at tackle while he's at guard. But I'm telling you right now, it's kind of nice seeing, Ernest Green, Juan Gaston, and really the starting 5 that we originally had began the year with, UGA began the year with, and letting Dontrell be that rotator now and get a chance to really solidify what we're trying to do up front. Because I want to bully ball them as well, Scott. I think we're going to run right at those guys. I hope we do, because I want to challenge. That's something that you want to do, is you want to challenge your offense to say, listen, they've got these guys on the other side that are studs. They think they're studs. Let's see if they are. By God, line down. Let's bring the hat. Let's click, clack. Let's quit talking. Let's do our job. And I think that's what Coach Smart does every week. If anybody that he does, he gets those guys hyped up, ready to play. And I think we're going to see good things from them. So just your thoughts. I might be putting you on the spot here because I know we didn't talk about this pre-show. But what's your thoughts about Saturday? Just how you feel. And you can give me a score if you want to.
I'll hold off on the score, but I absolutely want to emphasize what you just said with, if people are any sort of boxing fans, you'll know this name. Mike Tyson had one of the best quotes of everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And Kirby lives and dies by that creed because he is going to absolutely drag you deep into the back end of the pool and see if you drown, sink, or swim. And you're going to be tested. Now, this is not taking anything away from Texas. Obviously, they've been tested at periods throughout the season, but they have not been tested like this. Going into Athens, a really hostile environment, Georgia seems to have found a little bit of momentum. They've seemed to have found a little bit of momentum their way, but in a much smaller sample size. And I'm like you, bye weeks can go one of two ways. You can either continue to build that confidence, or there can be a little something where you're like, man, I wish we could have kept going and kept that flow week to week and really solidified what we like and what we're doing. Someone said in the comments, hey, do you think we can get Arch's head? The way you do that's exactly the way we're explaining it. When you touch his jersey, when you get him on the ground, if he runs the ball, you have to punish him. And I'm talking about between the whistles as clean as you can get, but it has to be that old school. When you wake up in the morning, you know you played Georgia football and you know you just came out of Athens either with a loss or really, really close win, because that's the only way I can see this going. But I think everything kind of breeds off the offensive line, which is really impressive, Coach, because early in the year, you're absolutely right. I was scratching my head. I said, really, do we even have a true starting five? I mean, we rotated, I want to say 4 combinations of right guard, right tackle at Tennessee, and that's such a huge deficit. Guys, one offensive lineman being injured or being young, that's 20% of that entire unit's output. And now you understand why Gunner was running and moving a little bit too much and wasn't setting his feet. It's because he didn't trust the offensive line nearly as much as not he should have, because they have to earn it. They have to earn that. That's a real legitimate connection you have. That's something you can't fake the funk on.
But that speeds up the clock and gets a kid off his spot. When you get him off his spot, you get him off his rhythm. So I see what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gunner was already processing a little too fast. And that's just, that's new jitters being a year one guy. When you know, and you can overthink the easy things. It's like being a bad test taker for some kids. Gunner was never a bad test taker. It was just always, I know there's more here. And you're hoping that he achieves that. Now, Texas is in a similar situation, but like you said, they're a few steps behind in that regard of, okay, we finally figured out some things, but there's a lot more we got to work on. And it seems like Georgia's figured out a lot of things throughout this period of time, and they're kind of at the 3rd or 4th step, where Texas is at the 2nd step. Mm-hmm. But I really, really want to get into it, guys. Like Jonel Aguero, CJ Allen, you're really, really heavy hitters. I can tell you early on, if Georgia's going to walk away with this thing and walk away big, it's the way they start the game and set the tone. Because, guys, look, I'm being honest. In combat sports and football, you hit someone hard enough, you will understand what kind of person and player they are about 4 or 5 plays in. Because you're not going to fake it when you're seeing stars, when your head's already hurting, you're already drawing breath, you got your hands on your hips. That's where we're really going to find out who Texas is, because I think we have a good understanding of what Georgia is. It's just a matter of execution. We know who the core of this team is. Texas, I think the coaches would agree with me, we're not exactly sure yet, but we will certainly know on Saturday night.
Well said, and I'm going to go ahead and caveat off of that. Sark doesn't know what it's like now, because he had that sort of open schedule last year where everything was being played at home last year. Now, all of a sudden, he's got to take that on the road where it's pivotal at this point in time for must-win situations for him, and he's coming into, like you said, that hostile environment in week 10 now, and looking at a team that's really on the rise, that's getting good at the right time, becoming great at the right time. And I told you about this pre-show. I don't know how many of you in here have seen the show Seabiscuit before, but I remember when Tobey Maguire's character gets hurt and he has to have the new jockey, and they're going to go up against War Admiral, and it's supposed to be this huge, it was the race of the century, and everything. And I remember Tobey Maguire's character saying, hey, just let him get up next to him. Let him smell him. Let him see him. And then let him go. And I remember in that, when they were showing everything the way it worked, and he said he slowed it back off of it, and they couldn't figure out why he was doing it, and the War Admiral got up right beside it, and he saw him, and he was like, see you later, Georgie, and he takes off, and Seabiscuit, kills him by however many legs it was that he killed him by. It's that same concept. I feel like Georgia does that with a lot of their teams, as you mentioned, dragging them out to the deep water. You have this mentality of, okay, we're going back and forth, we're trading blows, but all of a sudden, when you just think you're getting to that point where there might be a breaking point, we just slap you down and we're gone. And that's what I feel like Georgia's going to do. I do think we're going to cover the spread, actually. I think we're going to beat them by more than a touchdown. And I think it's going to be very important for us if we really want to feel like we have not say arrived, but really feel like a complete game is being played. The defense needs to step up more consistently at an earlier pace. I really want them to take it personal. I know you have to adjust on the go. Is Texas going to bring some things they haven't seen on film? Sure they are. That's all they're going to be doing in the beginning of the game, and I'm sure we might see some woes from that. But I would really love to see those guys flying around like it seems like they do, what we did against Mississippi State, what we did against Auburn in that second half, where you just saw the read and reacts just so quick. And us, when they did, you talk about C.J. Allen and getting to the quarterback from the second level, is that when we did bring 5 and 6 man pressure, we got home. And that's huge when it comes to bringing 5 and 6 man pressure, because when you leave and vacate guys from the second level, that opens up the middle of the field for those overs and unders. And if you don't get home, quarterbacks can dice you apart with that. So I'm very much invested in what you're saying there, Scott. And by the way, I know that you are I don't know if you're still active duty or what you do, but I sure do appreciate the fact of your service, appreciate your service in honor of what we had with Veterans Day just recently. And I do thank you for what you have done for our country. I have a father who's a veteran who's was in the Navy. And so I have a huge appreciation for our veterans and those who serve and who have served. So thank you for that as well.
I appreciate that, Coach. And to all those that came before me, I'm still serving in the Army National Guard for the state of Georgia. One of the best units, I've ever been with the Scouts and Snipes up here in Cumming, Georgia. Love my guys. But to all those who set the path before us, earnestly, you have all my thanks in the world. You're the reason that we are the United States we are today. So thank you for that.
Yeah, buddy. And, like I said, it comes down to the fact of with the way that we see things is a lot differently. And I look at it from my perspective. I have such a huge respect for those who are sacrificing their time and efforts, and they're away from their families, and they're, overseas. And there's some that, maybe still local to the area, but whatever you do in whatever capacity it is a sacrifice that goes beyond any measure. And it's truly appreciated from my standpoint, especially from a son who watched his dad and, deal with the Vietnam War and the stories that he would tell and the things that went through. Just like I said, I just have an unbelievable, just love and just, just such a respect for what the veterans do for us and what you have done for us and in that capacity. So thank you so much for what you have done and for being with me tonight. One last thing before we get off. We've been on for an hour now. I wanted to talk about the new top 25 here. We got the new shakeup here with the top 25. We look like USF is in that 12 spot now, with us still being in the 5 spot. Anything from the college football playoff committee rankings that just was head scratching to you at all?
Not at this point. Fan wise, it's funny. People are saying Texas Tech deserves to swap with us, which again doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But there's no real head scratchers right now. I'll be honest with you guys. It's hard to screw it up. I do think Notre Dame is getting a little bit more favor than they should. But think about it this way, guys. If you move them, who do you replace them with? And so everyone under, Notre Dame, you can kind of justify why they're in that position. I don't like the idea close losses give you a huge resume builder, because, look, if you split those games, that's great. That to me is a validity of you. I mean, seeing what Miami really kind of is. Again, they played really well early on in the season, had arguably the best offensive line in their conference, one of the better ones early on, has a really good defensive front. But I'm not going to lie, guys, if you turn on that tape, you had Notre Dame tackles literally turning 180 degrees like they just got Rolodex. They had no idea what was going on. So it was really chaotic. They found their stride, happy for them, but I hope the committee starts wisening up. But guys, look, Notre Dame has a lot of political favor in this committee. They actually have equal representation as a conference does, because they're the major independent. Have all the other independents that are worth a toot are now in conferences. Yeah. So I hope that, kind of gets fixed up. I don't know if Notre Dame will lose another game. I mean, they got through their 2 or 3 games that you could say, they did a good job against USC. So I do give them credit there. But honestly, I think they've done a good job so far. You can't hurt Indiana for winning, finding a way against a good Penn State roster. But I will say, again, lines of scrimmage. Indiana and Ohio State's schedules are not going to test them. Once Ohio State pushed past week 1, it was kind of like, all right, well, who's next? And I think we all knew in our heart of hearts, Penn State was not going to be the Penn State that was promised. So you're just not going to see number 1, number 2 get tested. Now, A&M, you will. Bama, you will this weekend. Georgia, you will. So when you go through this is last thing just to be a SEC homer. Pick any of the SEC teams that fall within the top 12 and try to tell me that they have not been tested, that we don't have a good idea of where they're at. Because Ole Miss has played Oklahoma played Texas, Georgia played Bama, A&M has gone through and played Notre Dame. So there's a lot of validity of what's going on. Oregon, I think, is another one where you're like, hey, I justify the 8th spot, but that Iowa game, well, weather is a factor. Totally get it. But I mean, Iowa, I believe, had more offensive output passing wise in terms of total yardage than Oregon did. So there's a little, iffy stuff there for everybody. But I really like Georgia staying in the 5th spot, and I surely hope that they manage to stay in that. If we go to Atlanta, good, great. I don't want to play an extra game if we don't have to. But I really want that night game in Athens, especially round 1 against a USF or the group of 5 auto bid.
Yeah. I was just about to ask you, that was going to be my last question before we closed up for the night. Would you rather be a playoff team in Athens playing the number 12 seed out of the group of 5, or would you rather be having the opportunity of maybe an Oklahoma upset over Alabama and, maybe Texas A&M being upset by Texas and somehow it falls back into our lap where we're playing in the SEC championship before going to the first round of the playoffs?
I would rather have that 5th spot. I think Atlanta's great in terms of, validity, testing, being a conference champ. I think that kind of salvaged what was a really chaotic season last year, especially how you did it. You watch the offense react to Gunner, and from there, kudos to my wife. She's just got a good gut for players. She looked at me and said, there's something special about 14. You can tell the way the team's playing. They're not dropping the ball. They seem to be really getting after it. And minus a couple, mistakes. I mean, you saw him lay his body on the line and made a heck of a play, and that ball was high and tight the whole way through. So with that being said, I think Georgia deserves a home game in Athens, and I think that's such a good way to re-kick off the momentum because Ohio State showed you, look, you can lose the last game of the regular season in really embarrassing fashion against a really bad team, but find that rhythm and find it early in the playoffs, and I think that builds up for them. So I'd say the 5th spot.
Yeah, and we have a sample size to pick from based off what we had happen to us last year. So it's real easy from us on the outside looking in, seeing what we went through last year and being able to call that shot. That's the reason why I do believe, and I think my buddy John at John Tweet Sports said it best. I think conference championship relevance is going to end up becoming something of the past, because why in the world would Ohio State and Indiana at 1 and 2 want to play each other for a loss when you've already got basically a bid anyway into the college football playoffs to play one extra game? And it calls, and a lot of people say, well, it's for the conference championship. And it's it. Well, if there's no relevance really to the conference championship because the playoffs are what matter, because now you've watered it down by 12 teams instead of the 6-team or 4-team playoff, is what does it matter now that you have a conference championship? We have an SEC championship, but it cost us a quarterback change, which for the most part we thought might be a good thing in sense, but it still broke up the alignment of what we had been doing all year long with the quarterback we had at the helm, and go into a Notre Dame Sugar Bowl game after a bye week. And, it really ended up, I think, just costing us that consistency that we would like to see. Not to say that we didn't feel. I think Gunnar Stockton played a pretty good Sugar Bowl that day to win the ball game. I think there was a lot of outliers you don't think about happening in a game. Not to get too lost in those weeds, but I think it's easier for us on the outside looking in. As I would much rather Alabama and Texas A&M went out, let them play for the SEC championship. We sit at home one extra week, rest up, and get ready for a home playoff game, which would be phenomenal, playing whatever group of 5 team ends up showing up there. And I know a lot of people are against the group of 5 making the playoffs in the top 12, but until they decide that that's something of irrelevance, then so be it. We get the benefit of the doubt. I love sitting in that honey hole at number 5 right now. I think it's a best fit for us. We'll see what happens after this weekend as we take on Texas, but we appreciate all of you that have been in the, man, it has been awesome tonight with everybody in the chat. I am going to put up here, Bill, is sort of farewell. Everyone going to the game this weekend, enjoy the atmosphere, and definitely horns down. I'm going to have to give it to you there. Cord Samuels, my buddy out at Texas. I'm sorry you're having to see that on video, but this week we can be frenemies this week because, like I said, I know you're going to be up in Ohio, Bill, and taking care of business, giving the Go Dogs and calling the dogs up there. And going from that perspective, we definitely appreciate those of you who stayed with us for the solid 68 minutes that we've been on tonight. Scott and I are going to be more consistent. You're going to start seeing more of us. We are going to be taking this to a different level. We're going to be calling ourselves Head on a Swivel. We're going to be doing rapid reactions. And this weekend, I'm going to be at the ball game. I'm going to be there all weekend long. I've actually got a big show tomorrow night with John Smith and Seth Saunders. We're going to be at the Creature Comforts Bistro, and we're going to be doing a live show there in Athens from 4 to 5. And then from what I understand, I might be going to the Steg to watch Georgia play Georgia Tech in a basketball game. And then we're going to be camping it up there on campus and getting ready for a tailgate all day long on Saturday. So me and Scott might be actually doing a live show from our phones to be able to give you some kickback to what we see. And that goes win, lose, or draw, guys. I told Scott when we started doing this, we always have to be perceptive. We always want our teams to win, but we also got to be prepared to talk and react when they lose. It's just like when you play as a football team. You rejoice and praise them when you win, but you also praise them when you lose, because when you lose, you find ways better next time to, get over that hump and to do the right things. That to me is some of the best learning experiences you'll ever have. And why football is the greatest game there ever was made, because there's so many life lessons learned from it. And those of you who have played the game, you will definitely understand what I'm saying when I say those statements. I do want to make this one last point here. The conferences are too big now too. Amen, brother. I have to agree with you on that. When you got 18 teams in the Big Ten and, we've got 16 teams in the SEC, that's definitely getting it to the point. Eventually, you're going to have a super conference where there's going to be something where the Big 12 is eventually just going to fall apart. I wouldn't doubt if all the ACC decides, hey, we're just going to create this 32 team, 35 team conference, and it's going to be played almost like the NFL is, where you have an NFC South, NFC North, and there's no telling what is going to end up happening. But I see something very similar to a minor league of the NFL happening. What do you think, Scott?
I think that's 100% right, guys. Look, I could go A to Z on the business aspect. Obviously, this is a revenue-driven sport. I think the ACC is kind of on its last limbs, trying to hold on to those that are subsidizing the rest of the conference. Even though Clemson's not doing so good brand-wise, you know who there, and everyone else, like the Boston colleges of the world. No offense to their program, they're being carried by those brands. So again, to me, it's a matter of time. I think you're going to end up with 2 mega conferences and then a third that's kind of in the same vein as the Big 12, where it's like, look, they may not have that elite team, but they have a lot of really competitive teams that makes it a lot of watchable football. But in your heart, you're like, really the Arizona State team that beat Texas Tech, that lost to Mississippi State, it's kind of, builds those questions of like, man, is this conference really nationally standing with the rest? And look, the Big Ten and SEC have all the leverage in the world. You don't need to be too afraid about the SEC getting much, much bigger. I know there's some people that I know have told me and reassured me, look, the SEC is going to stay regional. The Big Ten, though, get ready. They're going to try to absorb every bit and region nationally that they can, because they have the trifecta of NBC, Fox, and CBS. I hate losing CBS, but I think they learned their lesson with the viewership we're seeing from the SEC. But absolutely, Coach. I think you're going to end up with like that NFC division, AFC division, and they're going to set it up where the conferences are kind of subheadings. But at the end of the day, guys, the SEC and the Big Ten, in terms of leverage, they run the sport. So whatever they want, it's what's going to happen.
Well said, friend. Well, I know what's going to be a big deal this weekend, and that is Texas Longhorns coming to the University of Georgia in Sanford Stadium and playing between the hedges at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to be there. I definitely am going to enjoy all my fellow dog fans are going to be there as well. I know Scott's going to be rooting them on. We're going to be talking. Obviously, we're going to somehow set up to do some type of overreaction show, rapid reaction show afterwards. But I'm Chris Hayes, Coach Hayes Hudl. Again, you see on the screen, the Patreon is running. Guys, all of the breakdowns that I do weekly for the ball games, I try to give them all in one spot, a big offensive breakdown, a defensive breakdown for you. And I want you to be able to catch all that through my Patreon account. If you don't have a chance to check that out, you can always check us out on all of our social media accounts. Scott and I are very regular on Twitter. Real quick, Scott, give them your Twitter handle where they find you.
So I'm at WS Green JR. Just wanted to add an additional shout out because you brought up some really good statistics. Josh at Dawgs Stats. He's a really good guy. He brings up those things. And guys, that's what makes Coach so good. Stats are very, very good to have, but any legit statistician says, look, it is just the icing on the cake. And you know what the cake is? It's film. So Josh adds a lot to the game analytics wise, easy to read. So I want him credit. But look, man, Coach, your film breakdown in tandem with that, I'm telling you guys, it's as good as a scouting report. So that's where you can find me. I'm just here as your commentator, but Coach, go ahead and take it away, and I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, Scott, it's always a pleasure. He's Scott. I'm Chris. We're Head on a Swivel. We love to see you here. We appreciate you being with us tonight. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your patronage. As always, we love you. We hope you have the best evening ever. God bless. Take care, and go Dogs.
Go Dogs.